Okay, today we're going to be reading Lord of the Flies, Chapter 8. Our aim is, how does the discovery of the beasts change the situation on the island? Remember Ralph and the boys went on an expedition and they think they've seen the beasts. So now they've come back to the rest of the boys and they are reporting that they've seen the beasts. And we want to examine, how does this discovery that the beast is real change the situation on the island? So follow along as I read in Chapter 8 on page 124. This chapter is called Gift for the Darkness. Piggy looked up miserably from the dawn-pale beach to the dark mountain. Are you sure? Really sure, I mean? I told you 100 times now, said Ralph. We saw it. Do you think we're safe down here? How the hell should I know? Ralph jerked away from him and walked a few paces along the beach. Jack was kneeling and drawing a circular pattern in the sand with his forefinger. Piggy's voice came to them, hushed. Are you sure? Really? Go up and see, said Jack contemptuously, and good riddance. No fear. The beast had teeth, said Ralph, and big black eyes. He shuddered violently. Piggy took off his one round of glass and polished the surface. What are we going to do? Ralph turned toward the platform. The conch glimmered among the trees, a white blob against the place where the sun would rise. He pushed back his mop. I don't know. He remembered the panic flight down the mountainside. I don't think we'd ever fight a thing that size. Honestly. You know, we talk, but we wouldn't fight a tiger. We'd hide. Even Jack could hide. Jack still looked at the sands. What about my hunters? Simon came stealing out of the shadows by the shelters. Ralph ignored Jack's question. He pointed to the touch of yellow above the sea. As long as there's light, we're brave enough. But then, and now that thing squats by the fire, as though it didn't want us to be rescued. He was twisting his hands now, unconsciously. His voice rose. So we can't have a signal fire. We're beaten. A point of gold appeared above the sea, and at once all the sky lightened. What about my hunters? Boys armed with sticks. Jack got to his feet. His face was red as he marched away. Piggy put on his one glass and looked at Ralph. Now you've done it. You've been rude about his hunters. Oh, shut up. The sound of the inexpertly blown conch interrupted them. As though he were serenading the rising sun, Jack went on blowing till the shelters were astir, and the hunters crept to the platform, and the little ones whimpered, as now they so frequently did. Ralph rose obediently, and Piggy, as they went to the platform. Talk, said Ralph bitterly. Talk, talk, talk. He took the conch from Jack. This meeting, Jack interrupted him. I called it. If you hadn't called it, I should have. You just blew the conch. Well, isn't that calling it? Oh, take it. Go on, talk. Ralph thrust the conch into Jack's arms and sat down in the trunk. I've called an assembly, said Jack, because of a lot of things. First, you know now, we've seen the beast. We crawled up. We were only a few feet away. The beast sat up and looked at us. I don't know what it does. We don't even know what it is. The beast comes out of the sea, out of the dark. Trees, quiet, shouted Jack. You listen. The beast is sitting up there, whatever it is. Perhaps it's waiting, hunting. Yes. Hunting. Hunting, said Jack. He remembered his age-old tremors in the forest. Yes, the beast is a hunter. Only, shut up. The next thing is, we couldn't kill it. And the next is, Ralph said my hunters are no good. I never said that. I've got the conch. Ralph thinks you're cowards, running away from the boar and the beast. And that's not all. There was kind of a sigh on the platform, as if everyone knew what was coming. Jack's voice went up, tremulous, yet determined, pushing against the uncooperative silence. He's like Piggy. He says things like Piggy. He isn't a proper chief. Jack clutched the conch to himself. He's a coward himself. For a moment he paused and then went on. On top, when Roger and me went on, he stayed back. I went too. After. The two boys glared at each other, their screams of hair. I went on too, said Ralph. Then I ran away. So did you. Call me a coward then. Jack turned to the hunters. He's not a hunter. He'd never have got us meat. He isn't perfect. We don't know anything about him. He just gives orders and expects people to obey for nothing. All this talk. All this talk, shouted Ralph. Talk. Who wanted it? Who called the meeting? Jack turned red in the face. His chin sunk back. He glowered up under his eyebrows. All right, then, he said in tones of deep meaning and menace. All right. He held the conch against his chest with one hand and stabbed the air with his index finger. Who thinks Ralph oughtn't to be chief? He looked expectantly at the boys, ranged round, who had frozen. Under the palms there was deadly silence. Hands up, said Jack strongly. Whoever wants Ralph not to be chief. The silence continued, breathless and heavy and full of shame. Slowly the red drained from Jack's cheeks, then came back with a painful rush. He licked his lips and turned his head at an angle so that his gaze avoided the embarrassment of linking with another's eye. How many think? His voice tailed off. The hands that held the conch shook. He cleared his throat and spoke loudly. All right, then. He laid the conch with great care in the grass at his feet. The humiliating tears were running from the corner of each eye. I'm not going to play any longer. Not with you. Most of the boys were looking down now at the grass on their feet. Jack cleared his throat again. I'm not going to be part of Ralph's lot. He looked along the right-hand logs, numbering the hunters that had been a choir. I'm going off by myself. He can catch his own pigs. Anyone who wants to hunt when I do can come too. He blundered out of the triangle toward the drop to the white sands. Jack! Jack turned and looked back at Ralph. For a moment he paused and then cried out, high-pitched and enraged, No! He leapt down from the platform and ran along the beach, paying no heed to the steady fall of his tears. And until he dived into the forest, Ralph watched him. Okay, before we go on, you can already see some answers to our aim question, that the discovery of the beast has already began to change the situation on the island. But let's continue to read and see how it continues to change on page 128. Piggy was indignant. I've been talking, Ralph, and you just stood there like... Softly looking at Piggy and not seeing him, Ralph spoke to himself. He'll come back. When the sun goes down, he'll come. He looked at the conch in Piggy's hands. What? Well, there. Piggy gave up the attempt to rebuke Ralph. He polished his glass again and went back to his subject. We can do without Jack Merridew. There's others besides him in this island. But now we really got a beast, though I can't hardly believe it. We'll need to stay close to the platform. There'll be less need of him and his hunting. So now we can really decide on what's what. There's no help, Piggy. Nothing to be done. For a while, they sat in depressed silence. Then Simon stood up and took the conch from Piggy, who was so astonished that he remained on his feet. Ralph looked up at Simon. Simon, what is it this time? A half sound of jeering ran round the circle, and Simon shrank from it. I thought there might be something to do. Something we... Again, the pressure of the assembly took his voice away. He sought for help and sympathy, and chose Piggy. He turned half toward him, clutching the conch to his brown chest. I think we ought to climb the mountain. The circle shivered with dread. Simon broke off and turned to Piggy, who was looking at him with an expression of derisive incomprehension. What's the good of climbing up to this here beast when Raph and the other two couldn't do nothing? Simon whispered his answer. What else is there to do? His speech made, he allowed Piggy to lift the conch out of his hands. Then he retired and sat as far away from the others as possible. Piggy was speaking now with more assurance, and with what, if the circumstances had not been so serious, the others would have recognized as pleasure. I said we could all do without a certain person. Now I say we got to decide on what can be done. And I think I could tell you what Raph's going to say next. The most important thing on the island is the smoke, and you can't have no smoke without a fire. Raph made a restless movement. No go, Piggy. We've got no fire. That thing sits up there. We'll have to stay here. Piggy lifted the conch as though to add power to his next words. We got no fire on the mountain. But what's wrong with a fire down here? A fire could be built on them rocks, on the sands even. We'd make smoke just the same. That's right. Smoke by the bathing pool. The boys began to babble. Only Piggy could have the intellectual daring to suggest moving the fire from the mountain. So, we'll have the fire down here, said Raph. He looked about him. We can build it just here, between the bathing pool and the platform. Of course, he broke off, frowning, thinking things out, unconsciously tugging at the stub of his nail with his teeth. Of course, the smoke won't show so much, not be seen so far away, but we needn't go near the... The others nodded in perfect comprehension. There would be no need to go near. We'll build the fire now. The greatest ideas are the simplest. Now there was something to be done, they worked with passion. Piggy was so full of delight and expanded liberty in Jack's departure, so full of pride in his contribution to the good of society, that he helped to fetch wood. The wood he fetched was close at hand, a fallen tree on the platform that they did not need for the assembly. Yet to the others, the sanctity of the platform had protected even what was useless there. Then the twins realized they would have a fire near them as a comfort in the night, and this set a few villains dancing and clapping hands. The wood was not so dry as the fuel they had used on the mountain. Much of it was damply rotten and full of insects that scurried. Logs had to be lifted from the soil with care, or they crumbled onto sodden powder. More than this, in order to avoid going deep into the forest, the boys worked near at hand on any fallen wood, no matter how tangled with new growth. The skirts of the forest and the scar were familiar, near the conch and the shelters, and sufficiently friendly in daylight. What they might become in darkness, nobody cared to think. They worked, therefore, with great energy and cheerfulness, though as some crept by, there was a suggestion of panic in the energy and hysteria in the cheerfulness. They built a pyramid of leaves and twigs and branches and logs on the bare sand by the platform. For the first time on the island, Piggy himself removed his one glass, knelt down, and focused the sun on tinder. Soon there was a ceiling of smoke and a bush of yellow flame. Okay, now you can think of at least 3 changes that have occurred on the island since the discovery of the beast. And please write your answer in the Google form.